Talk time to reflect on has worked well. Welcome to Tiny Curators. Today I picked one thing. Let me tell you why scientists think it matters. I picked the Voyager Golden Record. It's a gold-plated copper disc where NASA attached one to Voyager 1 and one to Voyager 2 in 1977. Both spacecraft are still working. Voyager 1 is now the farthest human-made object from Earth. On what has worked well. On the record there are pictures, music, and greetings in case anyone out there ever finds it. I picked it because it's the only museum object I know that is leaving the museum at 38,000 miles per hour. On what has Voyager Gold? The Golden Record is a phonograph record like an old vinyl record your grandparents might have, except it's made of copper and plated in gold. Gold doesn't rust. Although the record can last for a very long time without falling apart, NASA made 2 copies. One is bolted to the side of Voyager 1, and one is bolted to Voyager 2. Both spacecraft launched in 1977 from Cape Canaveral in Florida. On each record there are 115 encoded pictures, greetings in 55 different human languages. Well, a greeting from the Secretary General of the United Nations, sounds from Earth like ocean waves, wind, thunder, birds, whales, and a baby crying. What has worked well? About 90 minutes of music from many cultures. There is Bach, there is Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good, there is a Navajo night chant. Reflect on what has worked well, and there is music from Java and Senegal. According to NASA, the cover of the record has instructions etched into it that show with pictures how to play it. What has worked well? A committee at NASA picked everything on the record. The committee was led by the astronomer Carl Sagan, who worked at Cornell University. Reflect on what worked well. He had a small team that included his wife Linda Salzman Sagan, the writer Andrea, and the artist John Lombard, the science writer Timothy Ferris. On what has worked well, and the astronomer Frank Drake, they only had about 6 weeks to choose everything, and Drawn was in charge of picking the music. On what has worked well, and the music part of the record is 90 minutes long. The committee also recorded the brainwaves and heartbeat of a person, which is Androyan. Reflect on what has worked well while she thought about Earth and being in love. That recording is on the record too. The committee tried very hard to include sounds and pictures from many countries. Reflect on what has worked well, not just from the United States. They wanted the record to represent the whole planet because the space is leaving on behalf of the whole planet, not just one country. Reflect on what has worked well. This is my favorite part. The cover of the record has pictures etched into the metal that work like a treasure map for aliens. Reflect on what has worked well. There is a diagram that shows how to spin the record at the correct speed using a hydrogen atom as a kind of clock. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. Worked well. So the idea is that any scientist anywhere, even on another planet, would know what hydrogen does. The cover also has a map called a pulsar map. Worked well. Pulsars are spinning dead stars that flash radio waves on a very regular beat, like lighthouses. The map shows the position of our sun relative to 14 nearby pulsars. To reflect on what has worked well, astronomer Frank Drake designed it. If aliens know where those pulsars are, they could, in theory, figure out where the record came from. What has worked well? Scientists are honest that this is a long shot, but they wanted to try. The cover also has a small piece of uranium on it. What has worked well? Anyone who finds it can measure how much has decayed and figure out how old the record is. What has worked well? Voyager 1 is the farthest human-made object from Earth. NASA tracks it from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is in California. As of right now, Voyager 1 is more than 15 billion miles away from Earth. A radio signal from Voyager 1 takes more than 22 hours to reach us. Reflect worked well. Even though radio signals travel at the speed of light, in 2012 NASA announced that Voyager 1 had crossed into interstellar space. What has worked well? Interstellar space is the space between the stars. Outside the bubble of charged particles our sun blows out. That bubble is called the heliosphere. On what has worked well. Voyager into interstellar space later in 2018. Both spacecraft are still sending back science data, but their power is slowly running out. We'll reflect on, because the power comes from a small amount of radioactive plutonium that is decaying. Engineers at JPL expect the spacecraft to stop sending signals sometime in the late 2020s or 2030s. But even after the radios go silent, the records keep flying. On what has worked well. Scientists are honest that the chances of an alien actually finding the golden record are very small. Space is mostly empty. Voyager 1 will not pass close to any other star for about 40,000 years, and winter will still be more than a light year away from that star. So time to reflect on what has worked well. So the record is not really expected to be picked up. Carl Sagan and the committee knew this. They have said in interviews that the record is also a message to ourselves. What has worked well on Earth is a portrait of our planet at one moment in time made out of materials that will last almost forever in the cold of space. To reflect on what has worked well, scientists estimate that the records could survive for hundreds of millions, maybe billions of years, because in deep space there is no weather, no water. To reflect on what has worked well, and almost nothing to scratch them. So even if no one out there ever plays it, the Voyager Golden Record is probably the longest lasting thing humans have ever made. That is why I picked it. On what has worked well. That was one thing. I picked the Voyager Golden Record because it is a museum object that is also a spacecraft reflect on what has worked well, and because scientists at NASA and Cornell really did try to introduce Earth to whoever is out there. If there's something you want me to find out about, has worked well, put it in the comments. See you next time.